Thank you,
Okay.
everybody, for coming to join us for another episode of the Stash Cast, where we have interesting conversations with interesting people, focused predominantly around commercial real estate and prop tech. The Stash Cast is brought to you by Needle. What if you could use data and analytics to predict real estate transactions before they occur? You can with Needle. Check it out at needle, nedl.us to learn more. All right, today we have my good friend Jared Goldman joining us. Jared, why don't you give us an introduction? Who are you and what do you do?
Yeah, I am the founder of nines.gg. I Who am I is like a what a weird ethereal question. I've Depending on who you ask, I've been in retail my entire life, and so I'm not going to be the typical commercial real estate podcaster, but I think there are some parallels to what you guys face. But yeah, I don't know, most of my life I've just been in retail and food service, and 5 years ago I had my back up against the wall and found a way to punch out of a corner and decided I was going to create something. And then through a lot of craziness and sheer will, I have slowly made the chains move every year.
Yeah,
So I
so
don't know. I still feel like the retail guy, but I guess now I'm not. Now I'm a founder, which is a weird thing to say.
yeah, you're speaking it into existence. Why don't you tell us? Because the first time that you told me, I was like, I have no idea what this guy's talking about. Why don't you give us an idea of what it is that you've built and the things that you've identified and why you decided to take this path as a founder?
Yeah. So I am building a quality of life platform for video game players. I've always been a gamer, grew up with red hair and glasses, got picked on a lot. I was lucky though. Like my dad was in software sales. So when most people couldn't afford a computer, I grew up with five of them in my house. So I always played video games. I always used that as an escape. Growing up with the AOL, the discs, the 40 hours free, 20 hours free, I was like using all of those. I remember him getting pissed at me because we'd have to pay for internet other than that, and I would be using them, socializing in chat rooms because that's where a lot of us got our only chance at social interaction, you know? Yeah, right before college, I had a traumatic brain injury and I had amnesia. I couldn't make new memories for 3 months. And the relationships that I had there, though I couldn't cement anything new, I didn't stop remembering everything I had already learned. So real life was chaos. I had teachers taking tests for me to get me out of school. Everyone knew what happened. And yeah, I couldn't tell you where I was, what I ate for breakfast, money I spent. I couldn't retain any new information. And when I went home, the only thing that made sense is I could go game with my friends. And because I'd been doing it forever, I had a lot of skill and something I put a lot of time into. And so it was the only place in my life where I could get a win. That combined with the support of people that already knew me, I'd say video games probably saved my life. So fast forward, went on to college, treated that like summer camp. I was not very serious there. Having amnesia happened literally like 3, 4 months before going away to freshman year of college. And so by the time I got there, everything was like mostly fine, but I was still just trying to learn how to get back to zero, doing anything that felt good, if that makes any sense. And that's
Yeah.
not conducive to going to class. That's not conducive to picking a life path or any of these questions I was not prepared to answer. And so ended up getting kicked out of school 4.5 years into a 5 year program. I was supposed to study abroad and graduate in Germany the next year, but I'd gotten kicked out and came home to very little options. Right before I got kicked out, the housing crisis melted down. This was in 2008. And I just had to compete with people with master's and doctorate's degrees for entry level experience. I didn't think everyone had told me if you don't finish school, what do you want to flip burgers the rest of your life, or all these cute adages we use to scare people into doing the path we think is best for them. I thought I'd be okay. And I was overconfident and wrong because they instituted the box. Did you graduate? Yes or no? They had to stem the flow of all these like huge amounts of resumes coming in. Everyone was out of work. So I just didn't foresee that being a thing. And because I never lied, no one ever saw my resume. So I bounced around retail, food service, had a lot of great successes in a space like I describe it as I was a big fish in the smallest pond imaginable. I was one of Best Buy's top guys in the world in 4 categories. I've done some really cool things for Apple
Awesome.
retail, but th none of that was conducive to me making the next step. There was nobody. I can't tell you how many guys that, like yourself, super successful, smart guys, they'd come and they'd see something in me and be like, "Hey man, is this it? Is this all your what's your plan here?" When I'm working in the mall. And in your early 20s, everyone always says, "Oh, it's okay, you don't have to have it figured out. There's enough time." You start getting to your 30s and you're asking yourself different questions. Is it always going to be like this? Could tomorrow even be better than today? I just bounced around from menial job to menial job. And even the people that liked me didn't have a mechanism to pull me out. Like I'd have some people say, "Hey, as soon as you finish your degree, like make me your first phone call. We can't even, like, we've got policies. I can't even hire you if I wanted to. But as soon as you get that degree, call me. I want you to work on this or do this." And so it was a bunch of like near misses, if that makes sense, which is almost worse than not having opportunity at all, knowing what you could have had you
Yeah.
done something different in your not so distant past. So the crux of all of this, in 2018, the end of 2018, I get fired for like the worst reason imaginable. If you're a hiring person, I got fired for culture fit. I'm an odd
Mm.
guy. I ask weird questions. I want to know all of the variables so I can help us win the best. But if you don't take time to get past the oddities of my personality, you can negatively interpret a lot of things. And so I would ask questions that I thought I needed to make decisions to help us win, and they'd be negatively interpreted by the wrong person. He was the VP of sales. And that's really, as a sales guy on the sales side, that's the only guy that matters. And
Yeah.
so I just had this reoccurring of, hey, this guy's misinterpreting me and it's getting worse and worse over time. And he's thinking I have like devious intentions. And it became a really bad situation. And eventually I was let go, and I was let go for culture fit, which basically means you're not one of us. And there's a lot of things when you get let go that you can overcome. That's not one of them. If you've built something with your two hands and you're letting people in, the last thing you want, what scares people the most, is toxicity. What if something, I don't keep my eye on the ball, we're going to let somebody in that's going to make this place a nightmare to work? So I sent out, I went on dozens and dozens of interviews. My resume is really strong, and I can even tell people how I got these metrics. So it's not even like I'm making things up. First interview, people are thankful I'm in the room. "Oh, wow, I see you were one of the best guys at Best Buy. We set a world record for number of units sold in a day on a door-to-door security sales team. Like I can sell. There's only a few things I know I'm good at." I was eventually told I wasn't qualified enough to lease apartments. And that was really, I had gotten so low that I'm looking at a 1750 an hour job that I have to drive 45 minutes to each way. And they're saying, "You're not one of us." And that would happen in the third interview. And so I went through this 5 month period of being completely disenchanted. And at the end of that, I had this idea one day that I was revisiting from a few years prior. Because I've been in video games, I always had this idea that you should be able to play one on one for cash. I'd have a lot of people sending me what's called a 1v1 request, meaning I don't believe you're that good. Play me in a private match one on one for, but there was no mechanism to have any kind of money or consideration. And it typically comes from people you've just beaten because they don't have the ego to accept you might be better. They have a litany of excuses. The connection's garbage. My team sucks. All these things. Play me one on one. And one day I'd thought, man, if I could play you for money, I would totally do that. I wonder if that's out there. And this is, I don't know, 2015, 2014, something like that. And at the time, it was not, I think it was 2016. It was not out there. And I thought, man, someone should do that. I revisit. Now I'm in a situation where no one will touch me with a 10-foot pole. I'm literally nuclear. I had a small amount of money, which seemed like Scrooge McDuck size piles at the time. It was only 10 grand, but it was the most money a poor kid had ever amassed in his life.
Yeah.
Me. And I had this really big idea. And I remember this moment very clearly of thinking like, wow, people dream about these conditions to to go start something. And then the next day I was magically a founder because I had an idea, which is a very weird feeling. It took a really long time to like mentally transition into something. First thing I did was I aggregated all of my data. I called Global Web Index and talked them into giving me, they had this cutting edge industry report called, it wasn't the State of Gaming report. It was something like Global Games report, but it was behind a $50,000 paywall. And I talked them into giving me this report. And I said, this is what I have imagined. What if you could make, at the time, the only banner saying was make money doing what you love. I thought, what a novel idea, man. What if you could make money doing what you love, not what you're good at, not what you could stand for 8 to 10 hours a day, but what you go home to recharge your batteries? What if you could make money doing that? And the the realm that I understood was video games. And so that's literally the only connecting thread to this whole thing is that a lot of us use video games as an escape while we're treading water from dealing with traumas or getting things in order. And yeah, I was like, what if that's my greatest skill set? There were times, Stash, when I was working 2 and 3 jobs just to not make rent. I worked in the mall for 9 hours a day. I'd Uber till 4 in the morning. On
Hmm.
weekends, I worked in a men's clothing store. And then when I went home, what I was the best at in my own life didn't count for anything. And it was like, this is dystopian. Something is like really wrong. And so I then switched the thought of if this was the Google of gaming jobs, what does that even look like? What if not only you could make money doing what you love, but what if you didn't have to live a diminished life because you chose video games? And that became the lens of like, all right, let's take some serious time. Let's ideate not just fantasy land, but one that's feasible. Like it's different to say, what if I could fly than saying, actually, I've built this thing that powers my rocket and it's only for 15 seconds, but I am actually, if this is, so I aggregated all the data and I realized I was solving the wrong problem.
What do you
The
mean by that?
problem wasn't like, this wasn't a 1v. I thought this was going to be 1v1s for cash. And that is not, as soon as I saw the global web index report, I realized people are using video games the way I use video games as an escape. That's when the realization happened, when it was like there were statistics like 36% of all gamers would quit their job tomorrow and game full time if they could sustain themselves as a professional. I ran the numbers to see how many people were made $1 in video games, $1, and then put that against all the people that were trying. And the math works out that in 2019, you've got had a 3 times greater chance of going pro in basketball than you did to make enough money to live on in video games. And I was counting you just making $1. It's based on volume. It was overwhelming the amount of people that are begging for this to be a solution for them. And it's not really a consideration. I think publishers do a really great job of there's two concentric circles, right? One of them is what we can make money with. The other one is bringing enjoyment to the community. And what they're able to put their resources are in the middle somewhere. There at the time, there was no financial incentive to chase the target that I set my sight on. And so it wasn't getting any attention. It's still really not getting any attention. But if you look at like trending data, how to make money in video games or how to be a video game tester has been the most searched term since the 90s. They thought video game tester was the way to get paid playing video. That job sucks, man. Like it's a really bad job. And as soon as you get it, you realize, oh, I didn't want to play the same level 100 times trying to break it. This is not what I thought it was going to be. So even what they thought the closest imaginable great scenario was not feasible for long-term sustainability or happiness. And yeah, I wrote some intellectual property. I thought this would be, I gave you a lot of backstory, sorry.
No, that's great.
Basically, what this ended up being was 9 different ways you can make money in video games. Only 2 of them are playing somebody else. You couple that with financial literacy. So not just how to make money in video games, how to keep money. And then we add financial instruments, teaching financial instruments, how to grow money. And what you have are the levers of meaningful change in somebody's life when you filter that through the lens of future optimism and self-worth. If you care about the way someone experiences the world, you've got money, you have future optimism, the fact that tomorrow could even be better than today, and you've got self-worth. And they all touch each other in different ways. And we just make sure that is the qualifying factor for the strength of our decisions. How does this impact the way you experience the world? Is this best for you or is this just best for me? And we filter out all the stuff that's just best for me. And what we have is a product that is designed from the ground up to give you a better life. And you're going to use video games the way you've always used video games. That's the cool thing is that before you used to have gaming for good, which those are really they're made by well-intentioned people that are not fixing the problem of gamers. The problem of gamers, and this is very clear, is most of them, one, I never was a good employee for anybody, even though I was like world class at sales. I was one of those people that the juice might not have been worth the squeeze. I became arrogant. I was cocky. I was really good. I would do things people didn't think were possible almost every day. And then I let that positive feedback I would get from people, I would let that drive my ego, which is horrible. And you only learn that in hindsight when you've gone too far. But
Yeah.
I was a cocky salesperson. Like that adage you're seeing in your head, that was me. And even having a lot of success, I was making 11.50 an hour. I had no opportunities to go into management. There's a ton of us that slip through the cracks, man. You only have to make like one mistake in this life to be pigeonholed into a really menial existence. I've played with people my entire life that either stuck in retail and food service or dropped out of college. One guy I used to play a lot of Tom Clancy's with, he was in the Canadian Army. And when he got back from, I think it was Afghanistan, it was one of those joint operations. When he got back, he wasn't the same. And he could not, like when he wasn't in a first person shooter, he would be shaking and his hands are sweating and get anxiety. I've played with people that got out of jail. Heaven forbid you got out of prison. You're totally screwed if you're not a builder. And again, because I was never a good employee for anyone else, what made me think I'd be a good boss for myself when no one's looking? How hard are you able to work? And so I was self-limiting. I was stuck in this trap of go home from retail, smoke weed, play video games. That's going to take me to bedtime. You wake up and you do it again. And
Right.
somewhere in there, we're trying to find a way to pull yourself out with no self-worth, without options, and without people willing to take a risk, which is not, that's not their thing. No one did this to me. I did this to me. But I realized the conditions on the ground, or even people that wanted to help me couldn't. They didn't have mechanisms to do it. So I know that story. I know what it feels like to be over leveraged in every aspect of your life. I know what it feels like to beg the heavens that someone would come in and just see me, see what I can do. I know what it feels like to be stuck. And I took a lot of value in being the one to build that solution. And so that's what it became, man. I identified the levers of change and we gamified the hell out of it. And the secret is that you don't have to play games any differently. Oh, I remember what I was going to say. So gaming for good, a lot of people don't take into consideration that 52% of all gamers are using video games as an escape. What they do is they had their experience that may not match the experience of the person using it as an escape. And they say, man, if we could aggregate the collective power of gamers, imagine what we could do. We could fight climate change. We could do cancer research. We could do all these really incredibly well-intentioned things. What they're not taking into account in is I'm talking myself out of suicide when I get home. I don't have time to think about saving the environment, man. I need to get some win in my life somewhere because everything is chaos.
Yeah.
And though the story's tragic, it's not unique. It's something that a lot of people experience, even super successful people experience those thoughts or feeling professionally dissatisfied or stuck. And we're not talking about it. And we're all just slowly suffering, man. And people are choosing to get off this ride in record numbers. Suicide rates are skyrocketing, and no one's talking about the root cause. There is scores of people that feel over leveraged and stuck. And then we made cute terms like the gig economy to gamify a nightmare situation. But the the other side of that coin is a lot of that stuff's necessary. Think of all the people that went to during the pandemic. Think of all the people that got a little bit of extra money, decided now that they don't have to, they're not in the cycle of, I've got to go to work for this 8 hours and be miserable. Can't wait to get home and play video games. When you had more time, a lot of people took that opportunity and the extra money coming from the government to create new things. And when they didn't go back into the fire, when they didn't go back into the kitchens, when they didn't go back into the front of house or the retail environment, people older than us got a chance to tell us how lazy we are and no one wants to work anymore. It's no, dude, you're not going to condemn me to, I'm not going to walk into hell willingly. That's not, I now have another option. That's what we're doing for other people. The goal is to raise the floor. We are going to have, what sucks is I don't like gig economy jobs. That's what this is going to be. And what what we're going to do is we're going to be an opportunity cost to all of their employees. If you could make money doing what you love, and we actually cared about the way you experience the world, and you could see it because everything was built with intention, you're going to have to do a lot of wild shit to get people to work for your company that is very shady. And I don't know. Here's a good example, man. I heard this. I'm not positive, but this is what I heard. Uber drivers on New Year's Eve this past year. I didn't drive on New Year's Eve. I decided not to drink because I was going to drive. And then me not drinking with everyone and just sitting there, I got really tired. So when I got home, and I'm an old person, when I got home, I was like, I'm going to go to bed. I'll drive tomorrow morning. The next day, I got on the forums and they were like, there wasn't a surge all night. The riders got a 4 times surge. The people that gave up their holiday to go make extra money because you need to, no one's doing that for fun.
Right.
They didn't get a single cent of that. And they didn't even know it was happening. So you're paying 4 times to go downtown, and I've just got a regular ride the whole night. And it's things like that. In low and no barrier to entry jobs, it's the war of attrition. They basically, if we can throw enough bodies at this thing, the wheels will keep moving. And some will be great, some will be bad, but the good ones will stay, the other ones will filter out. Well, when you take that view of the world, man, you are discounting that everyone has to go home and live first person story mode in their own life. And it leaves behind wreckage, man. So our goal is to raise the floor. I'm going to make this so incredible that you wouldn't want to do anything else. If you're making as much or more money and you're living a better life, it's going to make them adapt. And then we're going to put a ton of marketing behind that and show other people that you can operate in this way as well. I think that's the real power. Isn't really going to be what Nines does. It's going to be when other people see this and are like, oh man, you can be wildly successful. And it's not an opportunity cost of money when you do things that are truly best for the people that are working for you. There's, yeah. So sorry, I know that was like the world's longest run on sentence, but
Well, that's great.
it's, yeah.
I want to take a moment and I don't know if commiserate is the right word. I had a shared experience where I was working for a boutique brokerage firm and I was the only one bringing in listings. And it was the father had started it and the two sons were there. And I didn't see eye to eye with the man who was managing me. And one day after I think I was there for 9 months, I was doing everything that they told me to do and bringing in listings. I was the only one bringing in listings. They sat me down on a Monday morning, was like, this isn't working out. And they cut me. And I was like, but there's no recourse, but you gotta, I think both of us have persisted. We definitely have because here we are. But that's what it takes is persistence and just one foot in front of the other, whatever the dream is that you're chasing or pursuing. You're on mute.
Sorry, I don't want you to hear me blowing my nose. Yeah, and I'm super thankful for these negative experiences. Honestly, I had this realization, I think it was late last year, that everything that's ever been like horrible, wildly, why did this happen to me? Why does this keep happening to me? Horrible, put me in a position to care about things no one cares about. If I hadn't had this thing happen with that company where the VP of sales didn't like me, that was the worst professional experience of my life. I got screamed at by a guy who's 6'5". He's 6'5", like 240 pounds. He's in our startup community. And it happened 3 different times where we'd be in a room and he screamed at me so loud that the entire office heard. You'd come out of the door and everyone's like looking at you. And I was through not even wanting to change, I was desperately trying to hold on to this job that was horrible for me mentally. It allowed me to realize though that managers are so important. I'm not even a bad employee. Like you didn't even get the arrogant version of me. That's what's crazy is that guy was like years prior. He got the Buddhist version that was just a sales assassin that asked weird questions that you may not understand. He thought because I'm an intellectual, which is a weird term, but he thought because I ask questions that are layered and that I was angling to for things that I wasn't. If that makes sense, there's got to be some hidden meaning behind it when where there wasn't. I'm just weird. That's the explanation, man. I think differently. I want to know all the angles. And it let me realize what I will never, ever do again. It let me realize the importance of when someone is above you, when they say something, it could be very innocuous. But on the other side of that, there's a lot of meaning. And I needed to learn how to be that manager, have people under me. And you can't just be the guy you've always been because now your words matter. And that was an interesting realization. And one of the most critical, like foundational things that changed my life occurred at that job. And I was only there for less than a year. But the CEO, who I'm sure is an incredible person, I wasn't even there long enough to go to lunch with the guy. So I'm sure he's awesome. He basically said if anybody were instituting this new program called Four Disciplines of Execution, 4DX, anybody that wants this book, we will buy a copy for you. And I said yes immediately. And I learned to find the levers of change. It changed the way I think about a lot of problems. And I won't go into 40X, like that's someone else's thing, but the concept is you can manipulate things by finding the levers of change, where most of the time, if executives miss their forecasting, what you do is you just hammer the shit out of the guys below you. All right, that means the sales team. All right, so for every 10 calls, you get one guy on the phone. Every time you get a guy on the phone, it's just you got to make 200 calls today. That's
Right.
how they dig themselves out. And that this gave the example of what if you just had less expenditures? What are your biggest expenditures? In the book, it talked about workplace accidents. You're spending a ton of money on insurance and on workplace accidents. If immediately you just had less or no workplace accidents, you'd hit that sales goal you misforecasted because money's not going out the door here. That's a lever of change to accomplish the same goal. So now I'm thinking about the problems differently, and I brought that ethos into the company of if you wanted to live a better life, what are the levers of change? So even out of the one of the worst experiences, I was literally from this guy screaming at me, and he's an intelligent dude. He said a lot of things that were really cutting that stayed with me for a really long time. I was an insomniac for 6 months. Even through all of that, I would do it again in a heartbeat to learn what I've learned through negative reinforcement and through this life-changing methodology of finding the levers of change.
We've talked a lot about how you got to where you are now. Why don't you talk about that a little bit? You founded a company. Where are you at in your stage? What's the latest?
Exciting news, my patent just came through. I have a matchmaking patent, which is really cool. Yeah, I wrote 5 pieces of intellectual property and then tied them together. And yeah, it's wild. I really thought it was like Schrodinger's patent. Basically, I hadn't heard anything for 4 years. Keep in mind, there was a pandemic in between and now two global wars. And I guess they were backlogged. But what I was told is that they never go right through. That's why people can't tell you how much a patent's going to cost. It depends on how many times they find prior art. They put red line, you go back and forth, either dropping or changing things to they're now unique and non-obvious. And I just went 4 years of silence. And I was really like the week before had this realization, oh shit, this isn't going to work. This isn't happening. And I only have a small amount of time to still tell people I'm patent pending before, like if you check on it, that the ride's over. And one day I just got an email like, hey, let me be the first to congratulate you. You're approved. I was like, oh my God, I'm an inventor. That was weird. So
That's the
I,
case of it's always darkest before the light.
yeah, I guess so. I never really thought about it. I hearken back to, I heard this really incredible quote. Somebody asked a guy in his 90s, what's the most important lesson you've ever learned? And I can't remember who the quote's attributed to, but he said, most of the battles I lost were only in my head.
Hmm.
And it allows me to realize I have this similar, through going through a lot of different strife, I have a similar thing that I say to myself, it's not time to panic yet. Like you'll know when it's time to panic. There's a lot of things that you can worry about that may or may not happen, but you will absolutely, it's unmistakable when it is time to panic. And right now it's not time to panic yet. Yeah, I first thing I've had a weird go of it. My father was he raised me to be a salesperson. I don't know if you've seen like clips of Tiger Woods' dad. At 3, he's got a better swing than I have now, and he's been training him since forever. My dad would teach me sales lessons. He didn't teach me how to shave. He didn't teach me how to do all these other things I really wish he would have. I'd be 5 and he'd say things like, "You step in front of a parade, only the first block knows you weren't the leader." Or, "Jared, if you want to win, you have to change the game. You will not win playing someone else's game. You have to force them to play yours." And at 7, you don't know what that stuff means.
Right.
But growing up, you internalize a lot of this. And so I've got this attitude combined with life experience that, uh, critical part is he used to embarrass us for sport. That was like his fun thing to do, my older brother and I. So we were the source of a lot of his entertainment. My dad was the fun guy that everyone wanted to be around. He's the baseball coach, he's the this, he's the that. And so, yeah, we'd be out at a restaurant and he would like, as a 12-year-old, he'd ask the waitress out on your behalf, and you just want to like slide under the table. Oh my God. And it is really funny when it's not happening to you. He would do all sorts of stuff like that. So I grew up getting embarrassed all the time, which actually really helped me now, because now I'm willing to talk about things I know are going to be embarrassing. Like every time I talk about this journey, I cry. There's literally a ton of tissues over here from having Zooms with people, but I'm going to do it anyway because it shows you that this thing matters and it shows you that it's real and it helps move forward. And so I spent the first like 2, 3 years literally just traveling, talking to the smartest people I can find, being brutally honest about what the problem space is and what my experience in it was, and talking about what I was bringing to the world. And it turns out that this was a very, again, though the situation is tragic, it's not unique in the slightest. There's a lot of us, man, that use video games, and some of them ended up being really high placed people. So my first really big gun was the CTO of IBM's esports division. I cold called him, and we developed a relationship on LinkedIn. I'm really strong in networking. And yeah, so he thought this was great, and he started opening up doors for me. Some of them I was not ready for. I remember we were talking about getting API access. I wanted to be in the software menu of a video game. And I just gotten done saying, I'm not looking for the keys to Call of Duty or anything, just something small where I can proof the concept. I don't want to break anything, but I need a proving ground. And then he sent me a cold email to like the top of Call of Duty. Like I didn't even know it was coming. And now all of a sudden, as some random dude in Cincinnati, because what I told him, and I think this has a lot of value. If you're able to get me a conversation with this person or with that person, I will meet them in person tomorrow. I will fly to wherever they are. And this is at the time I had no money. I still don't, but it was important enough that we meet face to face for you to see this thing. And so I find myself at a Mexican restaurant in California for 4 hours getting trashed with one of the top guys at Call of Duty, just ideating and getting this thing out in the open. I've had a lot of huge wins. Had even more really big losses. And every year I'm further exponentially than I was. So a good example of that, coming out of that meeting, I heard the Call of Duty person say, "We would never partner with someone like you. You're a startup. You could go away, not even of your own volition. That happens all the time. It's out of startups' control, but we would partner with IBM. So you want to do a three-way partnership and we license your technology, we can totally do that." And that set me on the track to actually doing that. And on December 2nd, 2021, it's my birthday. I remember the day. My advisor called me and said, "Hey, we're in full partnership. Sit tight. We're going to go grab Call of Duty." And he was speaking for IBM. And it was this surreal feeling of, oh my God, I'm doing things right now that people said I was stupid for 5 years ago. It wasn't possible. Now I've got the belief in myself because I've been doing things, quite frankly, that don't make sense for a really long time successfully. So I know that I can do this thing that's in my head, but it's hard for other people to see it. And then 2 months later, IBM misses their earnings call. And my biggest gun was jettisoned from his position, and my deal went out the window with it. Felt like I was thrown off a cliff. I've had a bunch of different things like that where when something like that happens, you just tread water for as long as you can. I took a different job while making enough money to keep the lights on. At that point, I didn't have anyone under me anymore. The pandemic had burned down a lot of my business because key members of my organization had to go try to save their family businesses. And what do you say to that, man? Go with God. Of course.
Yeah.
But again, it was at a point where I was by myself. And then a few months removed from being by myself, I get this news that IBM and Call of Duty, so oh my God, there's this glimmer of hope. And then 2 months later, they miss their earnings call. And it's this constant when you're an entrepreneur, especially when you're figuring things out for the first time. I'm having all these new experiences. I hearken it to being a parent for the first time. You've got to look competent while having a new experience every day. You have no idea how to explain what just happened to the kid that it just happened to, but you got to look like what's going on to give them confidence. That's really most of what an entrepreneurial journey is, and being willing to get back up and do it again.
I think sales is a great prep ground for entrepreneurship because as salespeople, you're essentially an entrepreneur, even if you're working for somebody, but you're out there having to go and do business development, shepherd a relationship on through to closing, whether you're selling at Best Buy or you're selling commercial real estate. Like they're similar things. And it's that roller coaster of being a salesperson that I think prepares you to be able to take on the challenges of entrepreneurship, especially when you're starting something brand new, right?
Yeah.
That's one of the things I've discovered in as a commercial real estate broker is you just want to stay as level as possible. You don't want to get too high when you get a win, and you don't want to get too low when you get kicked. So yeah, I commend you for that as well. So how did you
Thanks,
recover
man.
from that? Or how did you move on is maybe a better question.
Someone I really cared about commit suicide. And in their note, they basically said everything that was all the fears in my head, all the things that I had overcome, it wasn't enough. And they didn't see a place for themselves in this world. And that was everything I was seeing in the data. And now it's like, all right, I know my own story. I know how close in the distant past I had become. I know pulling myself out. But now there's someone that I really fucking cared about. And they knew I was building this solution. They knew I was on the way. They just had to hold on a little longer. And they couldn't. And nothing I could say or do in the moment was going to be enough. And so it made me realize, dude, you are fighting for things that are so much bigger than you. I really think that there are hundreds of thousands of people counting on this, and they don't even know we exist yet. They're counting on me to get this right. They're doing what I did, man. They're begging the heavens for someone to see something in them. And the reality is, no one's coming. It's so hard no one's incentivized to fix this. And if they did, that solution wouldn't look super promising for a lot of people, a lot of wealthy people. If this works, imagine if you get a gig economy job where you can play video games and actually really live a good life. The opportunity cost to all of the different sectors that touches, you're not just getting the dregs of society. You're not just getting the retail and food service workers. You're now getting people that are in finance. You're getting people that are in all sorts of things that are going to decide that they're not going back to this life, that it's not worth it. I'd rather do what I love and live a better life doing that. So I think most importantly, most people aren't incentivized to even fix this problem. And in the face of that, it started with me looking, you know what? I should at the very least just track who's going to the website. I had that wild hair one day of I just need to find out if and is anybody like organically finding this? So this what saved me is because I hadn't logged into my website in 7 months, I forgot my password. And so it took me like 20 minutes to get into my own website. And then I started getting obsession again. I'm a really big proponent of finding obsession, finding what feels like you would do this the entire day if you could. Money doesn't matter. This is what I'm happiest doing. I want to do this as many hours of the day as possible. And I found obsession again and didn't realize it. I wasn't looking for it. I was just trying to make this one thing work. And then, all right, well, I'm in the website. Oh man, that looks so stupid. I can't believe I liked the way that sounded. And now I'm changing things and I don't even realize that you're back into the old you. And the day I put the smallest bit of intention towards it, people I'd been waiting on, emails from 6 months, 8 months, things started falling out of the sky into my lap. And all I had to do was show that I was ready, if that makes sense. And so I just got back on the ride without thinking about it. And more good things started happening. And pretty soon I'm no longer, all right, I can't afford to be a bartender. Right now I have a huge opportunity cost of all these meetings I can't take because most of my time's going towards this thing I was doing to tread water. I just got back on the horse.
Yeah, that's what you got to do. That's really inspiring. Where is your solution at today? Can people
Yeah,
use it? Is it deployed?
not yet. So I basically built everything backwards. During the pandemic, I had this really terrible experience of having to let people go.
Hmm.
And one such instance was a husband and wife couple. And I was basically at the height of the pandemic, you're afraid to touch doorknobs. We think this is going to cull a third of the earth.
Right.
I'm told that you didn't raise enough money to keep these two people, and they're a husband and wife couple. I know their son. And in the middle of that, I'm hearing, Jared, I'm like crying, like crazy, ugly tears on the phone, hearing people that I revere give me the advice that you've got to let two of your team members go because you can't afford to keep them. And I don't know what that looks like. I don't have the experience of knowing if you don't let them go, what that's going to do. All I know is I know their kid, I know their situation. They've entrusted all this stuff in me. And this is way worse than the average time. No one's hiring anybody right now. And so they ended up being okay. I refused to fire them. My company slowly burned down around me because I wasn't investable. I didn't understand that if you don't take action soon, you're going to crash the whole ship, man, just because you're not willing to use a jettison pod. And that's a hard lesson to learn. So
Yeah.
the next few years, I basically worked on the product side of clearing the runway, of building the relationships. I went out and got Phil Ranta. He was the executive over Facebook Gaming when that debuted. Talked to Miles Kovacs about celebrity endorsement. I was basically making inroads to make this thing that everyone thought was crazy. My goal is to be integrated in the in-game menu. That's what everyone said wasn't possible. And right now, we're currently negotiating API access, which is awesome. We, I'm having people join me because they've heard me speak. It's so weird. I had this brilliant developer who's this guy seems as competent on his side as I am on mine. And he's all in about the problem space and about me being the person that's going to bring the solution. And now it wants to be us. So that happened. I had somebody hear me speak and wanted to document this journey. There's a whole bunch of craziness I didn't even get into because I've already talked your ear off, but I've lived a really weird life. And so right now there's a documentary being made about this entire journey. Hopefully, it turns out with a good ending, hopefully. But
I'm
the
sure it
product is
will.
being built. The patent just got approved. Um, all of the advisors are clearing the runway. I'm having people coming after me asking if I'm raising money every single day. I've had the privilege to beat back some capital I didn't think was going to be the right partners. And so now I'm having options, which is a weird thing to have. I used to be the guy trying to find a way to get myself in the meeting. And now I'm in a position where I can filter the things that aren't a good fit. Not with everyone. I'm not the hottest girl in class right now, but
But you're
people are
cute.
recognizing that there is something here. Yeah, people are recognizing that there's something here that, like, oh my God, this is solving a problem no one's talking about and everyone's experiencing. And what's even better is I'm taking away everyone's reasons to say no. I can just sneak in on the back end. If I make this such a tasty proposition for you as a partner, I accomplish what I want to do anyway. I'm just solving your problem. It's the same way I do everything, man. I just solve someone else's problem and I ride the coattails in. And who's take away reasons to say no? It's
I think,
working so far.
yeah, that's awesome, man. I'm super excited for you and to watch it continue to unfold. I think that the something that you and I share is that we both identified a problem that each of us are facing. Very different, right? Mine is a business problem. Yours is more on the personal side. But we both decided, okay, there's an opportunity here to go out and fill this need or demand, solve this need. And let's go chase it. And it's not an easy thing to go out and be an entrepreneur. But yeah, I think that's what we're doing. That's something that we share in common.
Absolutely, man. Some of the best and worst 5 years of my life in the same time period.
Yeah.
Entrepreneurship
Yeah.
is anyone looking that doesn't know, it constantly feels like you're in a gunfight, just shooting whatever you can see. And nothing if not exciting. Good stress, bad stress, more good stress, lots of
Yeah.
stress. but it's all worth it, man. I've never felt more professionally satisfied while making the least amount of money I've ever brought in, ever. It made me wonder if the things I was chasing before ever mattered. Just cool.
That's great. What's the best way that people can get in touch with you?
Absolutely. First off, go to nines.gg. Nines is it stands for the 99% of us that can't make money doing what we love. We are the nines. So NINES dot G. And sign up to be a beta tester. Show people that you're registering your interest, that this is a problem worth solving, that if this was a thing in the world, you would try it. Follow us on socials. My email address is there, Jared at nines.g, Jared is how you spell my first name. And yeah, I want to hear as many smart people as possible. Tell me why it won't work. Tell me what you don't like about it. What feels icky. Get me ready for the next level. I am so good at taking constructive criticism because it's necessary. This thing is way too important for it to not work because I wasn't ready. So if you have any idea in your head or you want to come join me, Jared at nines.gg, please reach out.
LFG. That's awesome, man. Jared, thank you so much for, joining us today. I really appreciate you sharing your story, and I'm excited to watch you continue on this journey.
Thanks, man. Thank you for having me on your show and giving me a platform to talk about something, even though it's not in the commercial real estate field. I really appreciate the opportunity.
Yeah, the primary vein for me is interesting conversations with interesting people, and you definitely fit that.
Thanks, man. I appreciate it. We're gonna have to do this again so I can get questions out of you. It feels like I ate up the entire time just blabbing.
That's
So
all right. That's all right. All right, man. Have a wonderful day.
thank you.